front of us. What is God calling us to do in this moment, in this particular moment in our lives and in our country's history? As you might have heard, the young lady who led the call to worship today helped guide us toward this theme last year by asking me a series of questions in a game we were playing in the back, while she was in the back seat of the car. A game that she called Then or Now. Was it better then or now? After my assertion that we do many things, healthcare, for example, better now, we agreed that being neighbors, neighboring, is something that we struggle with as we connect with people around the world. Many of us are as likely to know someone in Australia as we are the person across the street. Does that matter? But also, we shouldn't pretend that the further you rewind history, the better people were at being neighbors to one another. Take the beginnings of this nation. This summer I was plotting my way through Jill Lepore's These Truths. She describes what happened the day after New York ratified the U.S. Constitution in 1788. New York was a Federalist stronghold, but there was a man named Thomas Greenleaf who ran the only anti-Federalist printing press in New York City. He came home the day after the vote to find musket balls embedded in the side of his home. He went to bed with pistols next to his pillow to be awakened by a mob outside. He fired randomly into the crowd and then narrowly escaped with his wife and child. The mob stormed the house and destroyed his press. This came the day after the state of New York had ratified the Constitution by a vote of 30 to 27. The big neighborhood was hardly a place of calm and tranquility at the beginning of the Republic. As the story about Greenleaf shows, humans are challenged frequently by their neighborhoods and what their neighbors believe. It's hard to be different in your neighborhood. Yet no place of vitality is entirely homogeneous. On another level, Fred Rogers showed us that and celebrated that. You'll hear references to Mr. Rogers throughout the year, no doubt. So I'll stick with one of the more famous examples of neighboring from Reverend Rogers, when he invited Officer Clemens to swish his feet in the same bathing pool as him and to make sure that they used the same towel to dry their feet, this in 1969. Just two men cooling their feet on a summer's day in 1969 when swimming pools were still segregated in some parts of this country. Just swishing water around with their feet and radically defining what the neighborhood ought to look like and how it ought to behave. So Jesus tells us a story about neighbors and neighboring too. Why didn't the priest or the Levite stop? There have been many explanations for this that have centered on a central interpretation by Christians that the priest and the Levite were traveling on their way from Jerusalem to Jericho, and they had been made ritually clean at the temple, and therefore, because they needed to stay ritually clean, they could not touch blood. And if they couldn't touch blood, they couldn't help. And they couldn't help because of the religious laws and practices of the day. And Christians have often therefore implied that all of this has been superseded by the church because we don't ever do this or think this way, as if legalism has never been an issue in the church over the course of the last 2,000 years. And the problem with that approach, in addition to not really making much sense, is that it isn't in the text. It doesn't say that the priest and the Levite were going from Jerusalem, only that they were on the road. They probably could have been going either way. It does not give a reason for them to not help, only that they passed by on the other side. Now, I'm open to the idea that these people didn't pass by because of their jobs or because of a ritual. I think they passed by because they are human beings. The idea here is that these people pass by when nobody else is looking. They do not fear any social harm for not having stopped. And Jesus told us already in the story why someone wouldn't stop. It's incredibly dangerous. The guy who has been beaten tells the story that or we learn from the guy that has been beaten that robbers are around. And before you jump up and say that you are 100% for sure the one that would have helped in this situation, just put yourself in a scenario where you are alone in what you perceive to be a very dangerous neighborhood, and there is no social cost to passing by. Nobody is looking, and you assume that you will be beaten or robbed yourself if you do not stop. These people don't pass by because they're Jewish or because they're clergy. They pass by because they're human, and many humans would do exactly the same thing when they're worried about their safety. Martin Luther King summed it up more succinctly. The first question the priest and the Levite asked was, "If I stop to help this man, what will happen to me?" But the Samaritan came by and asked, "If I do not stop to help this man, what will happen to him?" Exactly. But there is more to it than just the moral lesson of how and when we should help. I mean, why would we need a parable if the point of the parable was to just be nice to other people? We don't need a parable to learn how to be kind or to be told to be a good person and help others. Those are fine messages, but there's not much point in wrapping them up in a parable, is there? Now, the story is a formula. Every Jew in the first century knew the way in which this story was told. These kinds of stories are told in threes. We have similar examples, similar triads. If in this day and age, to a certain generation of people, if you say Larry, Mo, and right, you know how to finish that. And in the church, if you say Father, Son, and Holy, right, you're probably going to finish that formula. We know what's coming. So Jesus, of course, alters the formula. A Levite, a priest, and everyone in Jesus' day would have said Israelite, except that Jesus didn't say Israelite. The stories always went a priest, a Levite, and an Israelite. But Jesus changes it to a Samaritan. Samaritans are, in the eyes of Jesus' people, manipulators who affiliate with the Israelites when it is politically expedient to do so, but claim sovereignty, independence, separation, when the tea leaves look a little gloomier on the other side of the ridge. In other words, it's not just that the two groups have traditionally been enemies, but that Samaritans have routinely, in Jesus' eyes, routinely betrayed Jesus' folk after coming to a place of trust. We know it's bad when you don't trust somebody, but it's worse when you don't trust them precisely because you extended trust time after time after time, and it was betrayed time and time again. So it's not just a parable about doing kind things or doing nice things for others or just being charitable. This is a story about loving enemies, and also, if you happen to find yourself as the one who is in the ditch, beaten and robbed, it's a story about being willing to accept the help of someone that you have deemed to be your opponent or your enemy. One can, of course, imagine the beaten man after he has recovered and gone home. The next time he heard a line about what Samaritans are like, how they're all manipulative jerks and you can't ever trust a Samaritan, what would he have said? What would he have now been prepared to say? What changes had he made about his ideas about what his neighbors are like? What do they treasure? What do they find important? Jesus seems to indicate that the neighborhood would look very different. Very different, not just because you are willing to help, but also if you are willing to accept the offer of help from someone you had absolutely no reason to trust before. Which is a really weird story. It's a really strange parable to put in the New Testament. Except that we also know that unexpected help, unexpected gifts, are what make life incredibly special. Indeed, maybe even truly worth living. So we celebrate, we treasure this chance to participate in unexpected gifts, in the big surprises of life as we explore neighbors and neighboring and the neighborhood in all its many forms and all its many wonders this program year. Unexpected things, of course, will happen as we treasure our community and our neighborhood, what's already here and what we are hoping to do together this year. And we will have the chance once more to do many wonderful things as a community in this particular neighborhood this year. We'll have the chance once more to sing together. When someone asks me what's good about church, sometimes I'm tempted just to say, it's a chance to sing with other people from the same book, even if we don't like all of the songs. To make music together, and to also turn that into a metaphor about our life together. To know that not everyone was made to be a trumpet player, or a bass player, or a pianist, or to be a vocalist, but you need all of them and more to make good music. This is a chance to provide a foundation for our children that includes education and ethics and faith formation, spiritual development, communal support, music, education, and more than anything, a place to belong. The chance to work on things together. Just last night, I joined a handful of you at a blessing at the rectory of St. Teresa of Calcutta that is now several units of refugee and asylee housing right here in Montclair. We welcomed a Honduran family that has been living at B'nai Keshet, and they will move to Pine Street's rectory next week. How wonderful it was to celebrate in Montclair with Catholics and Congregationalists and Jewish folks all working together. We get the chance to build on the work of Kumak and to serve together, as so many of you have desired to dig into that work for this year. We got the chance to send others out into the world. There are now 3 trips to the Texas border that are forming in 1s and 2s and 3s. The Chases will go in about 10 days to Brownsville, Texas. And Roxanne and Annalie are planning to go in October. And I plan to go again during the December holidays to witness and to help, to learn and to testify to this crisis in our nation. We have the chance once again to build relationships, the chance for self-growth as we offer classes and book studies and movie nights and Bible studies and retreats. The chance to dig deeply in Scripture and discover our spiritual selves and learn more about the ethics of Jesus of Nazareth. The chance to celebrate milestones, to confront the challenges of illness and struggle and death together, to be neighbors to each other in kindness and charity, even if we don't always see eye to eye on everything. The chance to stop in this crazy, crazy world, as we did this morning, the chance to just stop together. 10 seconds of silence, I'll watch the time. I love that delightful line from Fred Rogers. Whomever you've been thinking about, how pleased they must be to know the difference you feel they have made. The chance to stop in this neighborhood at this time, this crazy time in our history, and to breathe in and breathe out. It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood.